everybody. Welcome to I guess this is still July, so the July 2025 webinar. It's hard to believe it's the end of July, isn't it? I don't know about y'all, but here in Texas, it's a little warm, and I'm ready for some cooler weather. But today we're going to have a really engaging and I think a hot topic, it seems. And so we've got some friends with us today that I'll introduce here in a second. But today's topic is going to be beyond the budget, turning church finances into ministry wins. Just a little bit of my background. I had a 30-year career in IT and software in the corporate world, and then I served 8 years as an XP in a church. And so I've got my own feelings about this topic and my own thoughts, but I'm grateful to be joined by some incredible resources today. And so let me go through the agenda first, and then I'm going to introduce some great people. So we're going to talk about what it looks like to build mission-driven budgets, and then what it looks like to align our finances with ministry, how do we have accurate budgeting, forecasting tools, and handling financial uncertainty. That never happens in a church, but also how do we encourage church leaders? I was just asking the panel that's here with us today, how long they've been in ministry, and there's a lot of years that are sitting on this webinar today in ministry. And we're also joined, her picture's not on here. I think she was afraid because she's so shy, but Tammy Bunting, who has been a CFO in the church world and in nonprofits and as part of the Mortarstone team, is joining us as well today. So today we've got Lee Radford. As you can see, he's the CFO at Fellowship Church. Abe is executive pastor at Chapelstreet, and Justin is over at Liberty. Man, I was ready to say how they say it on the commercial, but Liberty Live Church. And so and I can talk sometimes too. So excited for the conversation and grateful that you guys have all chosen to join us. We will plan on having some time for Q&A, so please go into the Q&A and put any of your questions in there. We've got Nikki in the background who will tell us when we've gone astray and we need to answer a question. But Lee, Justin, and Abe, do you guys want to just introduce yourselves for just a minute? Lee, just do a quick introduction, and then I'll let Justin and then Abe. So Abe, you've got more time to plan your words. Lee?
Sure, happy to do it. So yeah, Lee Radford, I live in the greater Tampa, Florida area, suburb of Tampa, Fishhawk Ranch. And so I get to serve as CFO or executive pastor of operations at Fellowship Church. We've got 2 locations. We're about a 26-year-old church. A little over 2,000 people per week call Fellowship home, and I've been there about 3 years, about 15 years total ministry experience between 2 churches and a stint in Guatemala as a missionary for about 8 years.
Awesome. Justin?
Sure. I'm Justin Greene. I serve at Liberty. We're in Hampton Roads, Virginia. We are a 125-year-old church. We have 7 campuses, and all within this region, and looking to expand there. And then I also serve with Given, which is a crypto and stock donation platform.
That's awesome. Thanks, Justin. Abe?
Yeah, hi, my name's Abe Doncel. I serve here at Chapelstreet Church, and well, I know it's not a competition, but we actually just celebrated our 130-year anniversary as a church here. We're in the Chicagoland suburbs, the western suburbs of Chicago. We've got 4 campuses here in that area, and I spent 25 years in the corporate world as working in that space and moving across the country in different roles, but have been part of the Chapelstreet family for about 15 years and on staff here now for just over 5.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us today. Looking forward to you guys being able to provide your wisdom and insight, or at least your stories, to the broader audience here today. So we're going to tee up 5 different questions as we go through the day today. And question number 1, what are some proven strategies you've used to build realistic, mission-driven budgets in your church? So I'll say that Tammy put together some thoughts from a Mortarstone perspective, and so we'll leave this on the screen while you guys are talking. You guys can enhance some of these, or you guys can choose to totally off-road and do better wisdom. But, I think the part that I'm just going to say the fourth bullet here for me is one of those things that's so important, is prioritizing impact over tradition. I think, and one of the things that I'll just say, what makes it very real for me today is I'm part of our church has been a multi-site. We're now spinning off the remote locations as independent churches. And I'm elder chair at one of those two locations. And the challenge that I'm having right now is people who have been used to how the old church did ministry, making the shift into aligning to the mission as we see it. But that means shifting the budget and the resources and everything to that point. And so that is just because it's always been done the way it was done at the prior church doesn't mean we're going to do it that way, because it doesn't always enhance the mission that God's called us uniquely to. And so that's one that speaks to me directly. But like I said, you guys are open to chime in on any of these, or really say the things that you find that allows you to accomplish that. And Abe, I'm going to let you go first this time.
Oh, perfect. No, I think, well, actually, as being a 130-year-old church in its founders, obviously there is a lot of tradition there, and I think so that resonates well with me. I think for me, one of the things that in approaching, I think the budgeting process is really understand that, as with most things, budgeting starts with clarity and with a clear vision for what is the mission. And I think this is not a phrase that I coined, but I believe wholeheartedly in the idea that the mission shouldn't change, but the methods should. And so we oftentimes start at a leadership level, whatever your executive team looks like or function, I think, is getting clarity on an annual basis on how are we redefining our mission for that year. Again, not the core of the mission, but how do we feel, what is our vision for how we're executing that mission in that year, and setting clear priorities organizationally for what that is. And based on those priorities is then providing that direction to our departments, to our individual campuses, to our ministries, to then say, how do you then execute on this iteration of our mission this year? And again, it doesn't change radically year to year, but there are adjustments. So I think engaging, as bullet 2 here, is early with ministry leaders. One of the exercises that we do on an annual basis and encourage our staff to do is really take stock of it and really list what are those things that are mission critical based on that area, what are those things that are kind of mission beneficial, and then what are things that are just mission supporting. If there's no alignment to the mission, most people already self-select those out. But sometimes there's getting just that definitiveness, what's mission critical, what's truly mission beneficial, and then what's just simply mission supporting, allows us to then prioritize accordingly. And sometimes those historical traditional things are clearly identified as just mission supporting and may not be as mission critical as they once were.
I love that. I love that how you categorize those, Abe. Thank you. Lee, how about for you?
Yeah, we have I would say, a very similar kind of head and heart approach and mission and vision approach that Abe has. I was just thinking about some of the things we do that kind of make it practical for our ministry leaders. Our budget process is about a 6-month process, and we're not in spreadsheets for 6 months, but it starts with a month or two of prayer and dreaming. And our lead pastor will usually bring us several things that are on his heart, for the following year. And those are typically an extension of things we're already doing, or maybe he wants to accelerate something that we're already doing. So just practically, we've got a 2-page budget dreaming sheet that we ask our ministry leads to go through. We ask the same questions of the same groups. It helps them bring everything together, from what's on our lead pastor's mind to what's already been established. We talk about things like believe, belong, become, bless. We want to build around. All churches will tend to develop some language, and we want to make sure we're building around not only that language but what's behind that language. And then that process, just real practical, will guide them to look at everything from facilities to staffing to volunteers to calendar, so that they're taking everything into account. And that's really helped us over the years. The budget was the highest priority. And now the budget is really just supporting what we're doing. So we're learning from our friends who have churches that are over 100 years old.
Justin, how about for you?
Well, yeah, to start with, one thing Abe highlighted was, probably about 8 years ago, we took a hard look because we had a lot of good traditions, but not a lot of those things weren't going to move us forward, and we were hanging on to those. And so we looked at, okay, what are the great ones? What are the ones we feel like the Lord wants us to do? And then ultimately, what are the ones that we need to, the fancy word is sunset, not, so that we could use those resources for moving the church forward. And so it goes back to the vision, mission, value exercise. Start with praying for God's leading, and then we focus our resources in that direction instead of scattered and competing priorities. We have a vision frame built out, and so we look at 7 years, and then 10 years, and then 1 year, and then we review and revise short-term goals quarterly. And like Lee said, the budget is now built to support that.
That's awesome. Any last thoughts on this question before we move on to question number 2? Tammy, you want to throw anything into the mix?
Yeah. Is there any difficulty in getting, and that may lead us into the next one, aligning the church plan with the ministry priorities? We kind of talked about that. But when I worked at Fellowship Church Grapevine, one of the things as we got bigger, pastor would always draw this kind of bullseye, and he'd have a dot in the middle, obviously, and he'd circle around it. And he felt like as his staff grew, they were on the outer circle of the bullseye, and it was very difficult to get people more into the core. Maybe as we go into the next question, or as we talk throughout this session, do you feel it is harder to engage as you grow your staff into that core mission? How do you get everyone into that so that they are not just budgeting, because that's kind of the secondary, as you talked about, the mission is most important. I felt that as I was in Fellowship Church and it was so huge, I was in the inner circle. So I heard it over and over again. But when I would ask even my finance team some questions, some specific, just like someone said about the language, I think that was you, Lee, they didn't even know the talking points. So they were very disengaged. So I'm just going to throw that thought out there. We don't have to respond to it right now. But I wonder, as your church grows in staff, is there any disconnection, or is there a way that you've learned to bring those people into the core so that they are really engaged?
Well, Tammy, I guess you're upset that we took out 2 questions because you just added a new question back in. But
Yeah.
but I think it actually sets up the next question really well. What are some proven strategies you've used to build realistic, mission-driven budgets in your church? And so some of the things that, we actually have a poll before we go there. So, Nikki, can you launch the poll? Sorry, I was, Tammy's question got me moving on to the next question. So, Nikki, if you want to launch the poll. So, what are some proven strategies you've used to build realistic, mission-driven budgets in your church? And so, if you want to give a short answer to that, that would be great. And we'll also, as we put these out there, we'll synthesize them and give some feedback as we send out the follow-up emails as well to this. So if you want to put in a question or not a question, but a key point, that would be great. And so I'm going to go ahead and go on to our next question while you're working on that. And how do you align your church's financial plan with its overall mission and ministry priorities? And to some degree, Tammy's question was a great lead into that conversation, because it's a question about we had a staff of over 110 people where I was at, getting all of them aligned to the mission instead of focusing on what they could do with dollars as opposed to what their contributed to the mission was always one of the fun parts about sitting in the seat that I sat in. And so, as it's here is communicate impact. And that's, I think, one of the key things that's here for me is the fact of, we always have to be the key vision repeaters in these conversations and communicate. And so that's one of the things, Tammy, to your question, but also to the broader question here. Justin, what about for you? What do you see in this for that question?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's, what we've had for so long is, we tell ministries when budget time came, hey, dream, do, whatever, but everybody was just kind of dreaming on their own. And so by kind of coming up with a vision frame first, we say dream within this vision frame. And so so we're all moving in the same direction. And to Tammy's point, how do you communicate that as you, grow and expand? And it's really taking that vision, that frame, and saying with the entire staff on a regular basis, like this, it's simplified, and this is what we're talking about. It's not complex. It's simple. You can remember it, but you have to keep talking about it all the time. And then when you get into budgeting, everything you do, you have to ask, what's the purpose? And so, really press back on them and say, these are all good ideas, but we need ideas that are all moving us all in the same direction.
That's really good. Abe, Lee, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I think Justin hit some key points there. I think that concept of just continuing to reinforce vision. I know we've all heard this, but someone once said to me, just about the time you're tired of talking about vision is when people are finally getting it. And so I think that is, as a staff, people are busy. People are often, certainly in the context of church, are absolutely mission, committed and passionate, but can also get very busy in doing the work. And so really realigning that, especially on a year-to-year basis, as as you make adjustments or make slight change in just the way the methods that you're using. We do that for bullet one. We do use a little bit of tool that you say, that term mission filter. And again, we've stole this from somewhere. I don't know where it was initially, but we have all of our ministry teams as part of the budgeting process, just with a kind of a basic 4x4 grid, which on the the vertical axis is just kind of mission essential. How essential is, as you plot all your activities, how mission essential is it? And then on that horizontal axis, how effective are we at it? And meaning how effective are you? How effective is that? And so you kind of get those 4 quadrants. And if it's an upper right, if it's highly effective and highly mission critical, then that's where we want to pour more resources behind. How do we scale that? How do we grow that? How do we invest more in that? Whether that's time, talent, people, whatever. If it's lower right and we're effective, but it's not very mission critical, how do we shift maybe some resources away from that? We don't maybe want to stop it, but we don't want to invest. If it's lower left, obviously, and it's neither, then we should be stopping those things or sunsetting them, as Justin said. And then, if it's in that upper left where it's really critical, but we're not really as effective, how do we strategize around more of that? So that's a tool we use to kind of filter that allows every year that annual, because sometimes activities might even move from quadrant to quadrant, year to year, as we make adjustments in our, kind of how we're prioritizing different activities and different focuses.
It's really good. Lee?
Yeah, I was thinking as church leaders, everything we do is it's a good activity. It's a good program because it's Christ-centered. And so what we tell our folks is we're always having to trade better for best because everything we do, assuming the best, is pointing people to Christ. So then what we try to do is look at it and say, well, where are we kind of seasonally as a church? Are we in a high growth mode? Then we need to be building, programs and events that are moving people through our engagement pathway because they're either new to us or new to church, or are we trying to open up a new location? So then, we need to make sure we've got financial margin and staff and time, to be able to focus on that. And so, being able to define best for people in a way that is unifying and vision driven and strategic has really helped them see, yeah, okay, this program is going to have a flat budget year over year, but it's for a really good reason, because we're trying to launch a third location. Because we're trying to reach, and connect with all of these new young families, that are blowing up in a good way, blowing up our kids ministry. And we find that our staff when we put it in that language, they respond really well. Because at the end of the day, we all love our particular local church, and we love the big church. So
That's good.
That's good. So a couple of you guys have all talked about having to reduce something, cut something, sunset something, whatever the case is. So how do you engage with so I'll just throw out a question. Tammy, I'm going to take something from your playbook and throw something new out here, but how do you engage in those dialogues? And frankly, I think the staff can often get it way more than what the congregation can get it. So how do you engage in those kinds of conversations? Anyone have any great stories? Because I think one of the things I've found is people are afraid to have to go to somebody and say, we're not doing that anymore because it's not on point with mission, because that person who they're going to, it is on point for the mission. And so how do you have those dialogues? What's that look like? I'm going to leave this open to the bravest person to respond. So we'll see who speaks up first.
I'll throw something out there, and then the guys can build on it if they want to. We strive to make data informed decisions, which can tend to help right size emotion. The emotion of how long we've been doing it, or the perceived, how great it is. And we can all find a life change story in any program that we're considering reducing or sunsetting. You're always going to find that, but you remember so-and-so who, had a life-changing moment because of that program. And so we try to shy from data driven. We try to back off of that a little bit to data informed. That seems to work a little better in the church world, while leaving space for people to both celebrate, the life change that really did happen, because it really is real, and give them a season or a moment to mourn the loss of that program. And so, which is why we take 6 months, because we want to have some of the big dreaming questions way in advance of when our congregation needs to vote on the budget, so that we're not trying to press something right at the end. And there's a staff member who may feel like, well, I didn't even have a chance to really, go to bat for my program, or tell you what was going on, or come up with an alternative, that I was really proud of.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Abe,
Yeah, I was just
Abe or
gonna-
Lee or Justin?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that. I think Justin's right. I think making it as objective versus as a decision versus a subjective preference, because we all have our preferences. Hey, I'd prefer this, versus that. And I think if that is the overbearing assumption, that can cause the emotions, as Lee said, to rise. So I think having it be objective, data based, and then also I think what we've tried to do, or when we've had this conversation, is acknowledge and celebrate the season that ministry or that activity had, and also then refocus on not just why we're stopping one thing, but what that is allowing for in a new season. So redirect, as kind of Lee said, the kingdom impact that's able to be had, or what we see as the potential future value of doing something differently. So it's not about this was bad, we need to stop it. It's just, as Lee said, this is another opportunity to reach differently and get support in that kind of context, versus just this is no longer working, so we're stopping.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to move on to the next question. But before I do, I want to remind people, if you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to put those into the Q&A. We're watching it and happy to chime into the questions as well. But the next question that we have here is, what role does forecasting play in your budgeting process, and how can leaders improve the accuracy and clarity of their giving projections? And so some of the answers, or some of the pieces that Tammy's put here is here. I think the key that I in my church, we always did a 3 to 5 year trend, looking back at what has taken place and what that might tell us about the future, recognizing that we'd have to take a look at how many people have left, how many people have come, what do we see the transitions, and that's where the analytics from Mortarstone was a helpful part of that journey. But that's just some of the things that I know I've seen. But Lee, I'd love to hear kind of what you've done. What are some of the lessons that you've learned in this area?
Sure. Well, we tend to be really conservative. We're in a high growth mode, which we're very grateful for, both in attendance and program related and giving. And I still want to be conservative in that. I've been in the church world long enough to survive the housing crisis of 08, 09 and COVID. And so I've had to make really hard decisions twice. And I think one of the things I've learned from there is it is easier to turn on the financial faucet after having made a conservative forecast than it is to pull things back. And in the church world, if you're in that, if your personnel is in that 45 to 55% range, and then your operational costs are another 10 to 15 to 20%, we have very little variable cost that you can go after easily and quickly. And typically that variable cost is that program that you thought was going to move something, advance some kingdom related thing forward. And it's the most painful cuts. And then we all love our staff, and you want to ride out a financial moment as long as you can without, having to impact staff. So I wish we could use a 3-year trend. I think still coming out of COVID, we don't quite have 3-year trend data that looks and makes sense on paper. So in Mortarstone, we're using a combination of the trailing 12-month and trailing 6-month. And because we're on a high growth curve, there's about a 7-point difference between those two numbers. So I'm currently looking for that right number. And then we'll have a budget, and that's going to get approved by our congregation. That's the way our church governance works. And so everything that comfortably and conservatively fits in that budget will go in there. And then I have a side budget that's prioritized. If we're outperforming and we continue to outperform, then we're going to fold these things in this priority. And it's already somewhat predetermined, with the information that we have, subject to change if something were to happen that we weren't aware of.
I think your sound went off, Dwayne, but I think you asked Justin. I'll go to Justin next. And Justin, I know you and I have had some conversations because I was able to work with you on the new forecasting tool. And part of you being a part of this panel is just that idea that you were really engaged in that forecasting, and not only forecasting, but able to go back and during a month, or instead of looking in a rear view mirror, we can project forward where we think we're going to be as what we expect to be. So I'll let you weigh in on this as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think it starts with going back and paying attention to your donors, right? So that's kind of where our conversation had gone. It's not just looking at kind of high level giving numbers, but if you really want to forecast, get all the way down into your donor trends to see how, what type of migration is happening. So, if we categorize donors in a way, take giving level, we start to see the trends emerge over time. And so, like for the last 5 years, we've noticed that the volume of giving in the lower tiers has been on a downward trend, but in the higher tiers has trended up. Now that's not the same as overall giving, but just in those different categories. And there are multiple variables there, but understanding why it's moving and where it's moving will inform your forecast. So we use, the tools you want to use are going to be your CHMS, and then Mortarstone is, really got it already baked in. We built a lot of our things custom in our CHMS, and then Mortarstone came out with it and could have saved us, 2 years worth of work. But, the technology's there so that you don't have to spend all the time in grunt work getting there. But so you want to look at your donor levels. You want to pay attention to the economy, especially local. That plays a part. And then just the trend in giving, or the shift in giving in itself. We've seen a significant uptick in non-traditional giving, like donor advised funds, QCDs, RMDs, and non-cash giving like cryptocurrency and stock. So, like with a donor advised fund, we see a number of donors giving large amounts once every 2 to 3 years instead of weekly, like they did for the last 20 or 30 years. And that's really, I mean, we've really seen that in the last 2 to 3 years. We've seen a big shift there. And stock, they used to give every December. Well, now they can give it throughout the year. So just paying attention to those trends and trying to figure out where those trends are, then trying to build that forecast around it. It's just a little bit different than when it was all cash giving.
And Tammy, can you hear my voice now? All right. So Justin, great. And I'm just going to put on something on top of what you just said. Actually, in our next webinar next month, we're going to do a conversation on what the One Big Beautiful Bill means for churches, and DAF-oriented giving is a key part of that conversation. And so if you want to understand where we see the market going from a DAF standpoint and the impact on churches, come back next month, because we're going to dig deep into that conversation, because we actually think there is a lot in that conversation for churches across the board. So, and if you're not figuring that out yet, it's time to start figuring out, because bunching your contributions and then spreading it out over multiple years is going to be a key part of strategy for people in tax smart giving. So, Abe, anything else you'd add into the conversation?
No, I would just echo. I mean, both Justin and Lee actually hit almost exactly our same situation. I think I think what Justin just alluded to is kind of getting a couple levels below just the aggregate trend. I think that's easy or more obvious for us to look at. I think it's important to, but getting into some of that, and we've seen some of that same kind of anomalies or dynamics at lower levels of giving, and some of that to really to understand what's driving that. We all know that giving tends to be a lagging indicator after attendance and some of the other things. So how do you incorporate all of that into creating a forecast that is informed? I think that's as Lisa, I think the thing that we try to do is use forecasting and budgeting and use it using objective data so we can make informed decisions, just not perceptions or individual anecdotes of what a given campus pastor might think or a given ministry leader might be seeing. How do we look at that in an aggregate to inform those decisions?
So Dwayne, let me
That's great.
Throw one more thing out there with this. So in my experience, I would spend time with ministry leaders on mission, creating the budget, and then partway through the year, and maybe Lee, you mentioned that as you talk about the priority list. But let's say you've created that priority list, you're ready to pull the lever, and senior pastor happened to go to a wonderful conference, and all of a sudden we've got like 2 or 3 new programs that are coming in the next 30 days. So obviously having some sort of contingency, I think, is also very critical in that forecasting. So that's one thing. But the second thing is what Justin alluded to, is this idea of understanding the composition of your giving. Because a lot of times we just present our giving as dollars or growth percentages, and we haven't really dug into the composition. So when we're asked the question, why is it down or why is it up? We didn't, before Mortarstone was able to build out the new forecasting, and hopefully you'll get an opportunity to see that at some point. But that has been a huge challenge for me, is to be able to really answer the question why. And I think being able to answer the question why more often will potentially give the senior pastor or the leaders an understanding of where they're going. So when they make those decisions, it's going to have an impact on that bottom line. So just any comments, just we can wrap this one up, but that has been a real challenge for me, both of those, to be able to answer the question why and to manage to the visionary leader. Anyone want to weigh in? Or else,
Tammy, I've never had the experience where my lead pastor has shifted direction on me. So I don't have any experience with that, so I can't speak to that. Sorry.
He's kidding.
I am.
Jamie, I had a similar conversation with our lead pastor, who have a really good relationship as I would with our staff members, which is we're probably going to have to look at a series of trade-offs. And
Mhm.
so we may have some priorities that we had built months before, and there's a new opportunity. I want our lead pastor to be sensitive to those. And what we knew to be true 3 to 6 months ago, and when we start budgeting, we could have started, some of those conversations could be 18 months old, and so things will change. But it is still a gentle conversation of, if we do that, then we probably won't be able to do one of these other things as soon as you think we might be able to. And you're just reshifting. And so it's a very similar conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, at least. So.
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
good. Abe?
yeah, I was just gonna say, one other thing that we also, and again, obviously I think all great leaders have some level of visionary to them, and it's easy to get attracted to different things. I think we've tried to look at what is truly the total cost, not just financial, because the financial cost sometimes can be the easiest to solve for folks but what is the cost to even the capacity of our staff to implement this, on the mission blur that might occur, to a lack of focus. So really encompassing, having that conversation at that executive leadership level on what's the true cost of this, and if it's unworth it, how do we make those adjustments? But not, I think it's sometimes by default is, can we pay for it or not? But that might is often not the only question, or even the most impactful one, depending on the situation.
Yeah, that's good. So there's another poll. So Nikki, if you want to put the poll up, but someone asked this question already, and Justin leaned into this a little bit as far as what tools or methods have you found most effective for forecasting giving trends? And Tammy, I just ask you, we've already mentioned the new tool, the new resource that Mortarstone has produced. Talk a little bit about what we've done here and what we're hoping to help churches with in this.
So yeah, late in the year last year, and we would have started in early January, actually developing this new component, because I actually knocked on David's door and I said, as I'm kind of in my season of my finale, I'm on my way out the door, and I really am so frustrated that in budgeting, I have to utilize Excel and multiple components, the church management system, spend time really gathering and compiling that data in order to try to project. And it's not just for budget, for operations. I've had to do that for construction loans of new buildings, and the bank wants me to project out 10 years of giving. And it's like, okay, I'll look into my crystal ball. I wanted some hard data to be able to use. And part of that would come from the information in Mortarstone. But I wanted Mortarstone to already build out a component that would take all of the information that's happened based on, like what Justin said, by giving components, your top givers, your core givers, your new givers, your giver participation, and build out a trend and forecast for me based on that information, so I have something to look at as I build my budget. But the most important piece is, once we've used that data to build out our budget using that content, I now want to manage to it so that during a month, I can actually see, based on my large givers, we're way off mark, or our core, or people are moving between, they've moved from top to core. It's impacting our giving, so that maybe we can knock on the door of the communications team or the senior pastor, and a giving moment can happen where I can change the trajectory. It's been very frustrating to always look back and know that that's already happened and I can't change it. So it'd be nice to be able to forecast, but also be predictive in a current month. And Mortarstone has built that out. We've just launched it. It's been well received by the people on this panel. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have something like this to partner with me, as I'm not only building my budget, but reporting to the board and being able to answer the question why.
And Tammy, thank you, because it's been great working with Tammy as we've launched that. And I'll just say some of it came also as Tammy and I sat down for the first time, we realized our hearts were aligned in this conversation, because I always hated walking in at somebody asking me, what should giving be? The question I almost hated more was, why didn't it hit that number? Either it was up or down. And I was like, well, let me go find out. And I sat with the church last week, and we went through what's happened month by month to date, year to date, and we were able to isolate down very quickly where were things shifting from what was projected, what they were projecting versus what actually was real. And being able to isolate that down allowed us to start to realize that, as part of our belief is that giving isn't something that happens to a church. Giving is something that we actually have the opportunity to influence, because it's about changing people's lives so that they realize that giving is an act of worship. And so that's just one of the things that we want to equip churches in that way. So Tammy, thank you. And I'm going to move on to our next question, because we've got several good questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get those at the end. But let me ask this question. When financial challenges arise, how do you respond with both confidence and creativity? And what I would say, here for me, one of the biggest things that I just see in this is the fact of the clarity builds trust is number one. Being very clear with people about what's real and what's not. Things in the corner don't get better with age. They typically get worse. And so without engaging people and being transparent, it's always going to be part of the challenge. And I recognize there's a certain amount of transparency that you've got to watch for, but on the flip side of it, as soon as you can, begin to engage people in the journey is always helpful in that. So Abe, how about for you? What's, back to the question of, financial challenges, how do you handle it with creativity and, also with joy in that?
No, it's a great question, and actually a very timely one for us here at Chapelstreet. We're actually in the midst of a transition of our lead pastor, so we've seen a little bit of a challenging time financially, as would be expected anytime you're in that season. We've seen some change in our givers, and some who have in transition in some of our attendance patterns, and so it's caused us to be in a season of looking at engaging in addressing some financial realities that have been different from our norm over the last few years. I think what you have listed here is some of the key things. I think being transparent, understanding the why, and I also think, though, the key for us has been, I think it's important, is understand, as we just alluded to, the where we're operating in the church is not like any other business. So in any other financial, coming out of the corporate world, you're either going to cut costs or raise prices and generate revenue and solve you pulling those levers. Here, I think there's certainly some of that you want to be prudent and good stewards of, but I think also that, what we've tried to do is how do we engage those, because giving and finances are a part of discipleship, and how do we disciple our community? How do we engage those who have the gift of generosity, not just your top 10 givers, but those, one of the things we've looked to do in this season around the creativity is look at who are those that we would say have demonstrated a gift of generosity across our demographic spectrum. Typically, our top givers are in that 50+ age group that are kind of at that, right? But we've looked at engaging top givers from our 20 and 30 group, our 30 and 40 group, and helping to cast vision, helping disciple, helping to again approach them in a way that understands what it means to be a part of the church, and not and do that with confidence, with a sense of not desperation, but a vision for where we're going, even in this season of being in between, between an ending and yet and anticipating a new beginning for us as a church, with a new lead pastor. So I think that's ways that we've tried to engage in this season.
That's great. Justin, how about for you?
I would say I would, look at it from the internal side, an ounce of prevention. When you do your budget for years, we did a budget based on here's what we're going to do next year. And then we look at it and well, it's 105% of last year's giving, right? So it's a lot of faith in there. And changing the perspective of doing it with based on 90% of the previous 12 months receipts. So that gives you built-in margin from the start. This allows for giving fluctuations, unplanned ministry opportunities, etc. Whether it's a major HVAC unit went out, or like Tammy said, the pastor went to a conference. Both of those can be expensive. So don't try to start at 90%, start at 100%, reduce 1% a year, work towards it. The other thing is, kind of in conjunction with that, is build a healthy reserve. The general consensus is 90 to 180 days of operating cash. Start at 30, then 60, then 90. Most churches won't experience giving drops to zero. So a 90-day reserve will give you plenty of time to make adjustments if you need to. So you can do it at a comfortable pace as opposed to, a fire sale.
That's good. Lee, what do you want to add to the equation?
As we went through COVID, and we had to, in 2023, we had to rebudget a couple of times because we were not aware of the kind of the magnitude of change that was coming our way. I think one of the things we got right in that was being very mindful about communicating with all of the different groups. So with our deacons and our elders and our staff. So, clarity builds trust. But what we wanted out of that is we wanted to preserve unity. And we wanted the church family, to view what we were going through, and the need to be creative, and the need to rethink. We wanted the church to remain unified. We felt like that needed to start with key lay leaders and staff, and then build out from there. And so that takes so much, more work. And my preference would be to sit alone with my spreadsheet and figure it all out, in the quiet of my office. But getting out and having, really a long series of conversations, and really healthy conversations. And people appreciate, being invited in. And I think that paid dividends. And so when we would say,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to have to make a change, people understood, and it kept us unified in that season.
So a question that came in that's somewhat similar to this is, do you always present a balanced budget, or show a surplus or a deficit? Anybody not present a balanced budget?
I think what Justin just alluded to, we will present a balanced budget with a portion of that is a reserve amount. So it's not necessarily allocated to a given ministry fund, but so it's budgeted as that reserve amount. And it helps, we keep that separate from our operating reserve that we build year over year, but just what percent of that this year's budget is in that reserve bucket.
So in the spirit of Dave Ramsey, every dollar has a name, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
with Justin, he mentioned the 90%, and that's every year. So if you stick to that, and I know Lee, you and I've talked about that, and at different life cycles of the church, that's easier than other times.
Right.
When you're in a growth mode, and maybe Justin or Lee can weigh in on that, but I know that one of the things that my senior pastors were not meant in their minds, the money coming in is meant for ministry. It's not to put in the bank to save. But I wrote a whole article on rainy day funds, because as much as we want to spend every penny, just exactly what has been mentioned here, the HVAC's going to go. We have to run it like a business. We know it's a church, but we need to be prepared and be good stewards. But Lee, you want to weigh in on that 90% for you guys? Is that a possibility yet?
Well, and I'm going to say, make it short, Lee, because we need to move on. But
Okay.
I'll make it short. It's an aspiration that we're working towards, because we want to drive a wedge, that's growing between giving and expenses, and that's a work in process. And it will take us a couple of years to make a significant dent in that.
That's good. So question number 5. So this is the money question, guys. What advice would you give to church leaders who are new to budgeting or feeling overwhelmed by financial planning? Dave, because we know that you guys never feel overwhelmed by financial planning or the challenges here. So that's why you're on here. But some of the simple things here is, to me, the second one here is the budget's just a tool. It shouldn't be a burden, and it's about people and God's glory. So to me, and God owns it all anyway. So I always walk into those situations recognizing that there's nothing that God hasn't already provided the resources for that he wants us to accomplish. The question is have I asked the right questions to unleash the resources? So that's my perspective, but I'd love to hear you guys's. Lee, start out.
Sure. To take a pastoral moment, if you're overwhelmed, I would point you to God's word and see what he has to say, not only about money, and there's plenty of verses about money, but how he loves us, how he provides, the value that he places on the local church. It's the bride of Christ. And so that doesn't guarantee that we're going to get every dollar that we want or think we even or need, or that we're going to see the outcome from a ministry program or event that we desired. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're doing anything wrong if we don't see that outcome, because the outcome doesn't change that the church is the bride of Christ. So if you're overwhelmed, I would go there. And then practically, I would start small. If it's not something that you're doing, start with a spreadsheet, and build a budget, grow from there. Everybody's probably got a church management system and at least, in a basic accounting system. So you've got your two sources of data there, put together a really great, starter spreadsheet that's going to give you a sense of direction. And I do think as you get things on paper, some of that stress begins to reduce as you see a plan come together.
That's great. Justin?
Yeah, I would say, just allow for flexibility. The budget at the beginning of the year highlights the priorities of at the start, what's to come, but you have to allow for changing priorities and circumstances that you couldn't plan for. And so, it's okay if 1 month it's behind 1 or 2%, because the way your ministry spends is going to be higher in some months, lower than other months. And, I've talked to folks who are real rigid about those percentages every month, and it's going to drive you nuts if you do that. So just try to be flexible with it and then pay attention to those patterns so that when you do it the next year, it'll make a little more sense and be a little less overwhelming.
That's great. Abe, you want to bring it home?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just,
from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a great comment. I think a couple of things is, again, there are great tools, and I would echo Mortarstone has been a great resource to us. So while I know this, we're on the call with Mortarstone, but I think finding whether it's tools to Mortarstone or others that can help make this more effective, more efficient, you don't need to overcomplicate it. The other thing I think that's important is understand that while the responsibility often falls on us as the CFO or the executive pastor or the accountant, that it really is what we've tried to convey here is it's a shared responsibility of our entire staff to be good stewards. So I don't think you want to try to carry that burden alone and have the perspective in your organization be, well, I don't know what's going on. That's finance's problem, or that's the finance director's responsibility. Yes, as far as obviously creating that system, but really communicating and establishing an environment where your entire staff and even beyond your church recognizes the responsibility, again, as a church and as a team, that we're all responsible for stewarding these resources well, spending in a way that's going to have gospel impact and leveraging those resources for the kingdom and for his glory. I think ultimately that takes some of that weight off of individually being accountable for all that.
That's great. Guys, thank you so much. And there's a couple questions I'm going to throw out here from the audience, and we'll have some probably unanswered questions, but I'll give everyone a pathway on how we can be a part of answering those questions. But one of the questions that's in here is, do any of the panelists have seasonality that impacts cash flow, and how do you manage that? So let's just start with that, and so go from there. Abe, you look like you've got an answer.
Yeah. Short answer, I think we all probably do. I think that's the nature of the giving patterns, but and that's one of the things we've used some of the data tools for, is to look at that seasonality and knowing that, upwards of 20 for us, for instance, upwards of almost 20% of our giving the last 3 years has come in the month of December. And so as we were budgeting that and calculating that, I know as I build our forecasts for the revenue coming in or the giving coming in, I look at it historically and know that some months might be as little as 5 and 6%, and some months as high as 18, 19%. So I think that helps, as Justin alluded to, understand not only is your spending going to have seasonality, obviously, in June when we got 3 weeks of vacation Bible school, it's a little bit heavier spend in our kids department than in August when there's almost nothing going on in kids. So having that historical data, using that so that not only can you plan accordingly, but you're aware of then some of that trending. So we absolutely use that and leverage that as we build our forecast of giving.
Awesome. So does anyone have a line of credit or liquidity that they take advantage of to deal with the seasonality?
We self-finance our seasonality through our rainy day fund. We do have a line of credit, but we don't want to tap into that just for the seasonality. Our seasonality swing is not big enough to need to do that. But that rainy day fund, when we budget seasonally, income and expenses, and those seasons don't match. And so many of us probably have a finance team. I spend a lot of time educating those really smart businessmen and women that we're going to have a whole lot of months during the year where expenses are going to be greater than income, and that 15% of our income is going to come in at Christmas. And so it's a little bit like being in the retail world. You're just trying to get to the holiday season in that space. But part of our rainy day fund is to self-finance any time that the operating account might get lower than we're comfortable with. And then we would look to December if we needed to tap into that. Part of December's opportunity and role would be able to help us replenish that.
That's great. I know for us at my church, we actually shifted the fiscal year so that the hockey stick at the end of December actually came in the middle of the fiscal year, so that we actually could, and that actually solved a lot of our rainy day challenges because we didn't have to hope for a good December. We knew what December actually had accomplished. So we're out of time. And so just a couple things. Just key takeaways is we have to remember that mission must drive the money, not the other way around. If we're trying to figure out the money first, then it's going to be a challenge. Involve your team, communicate. Forecasting is an art, and be proactive, not reactive. And, over time, confidence is going to grow. And I'll just say, we at Mortarstone, our goal is to provide you, and I love, Lee, how you said it, data-informed ministry and discipleship is what our purpose is, and we're grateful to be able to do it with partners like the guys on the call with us today. So Lee, Justin, Abe, thank you guys so much for your time and your wisdom, and we look forward to actually another conversation. So as we look towards the future, there's some outstanding questions that didn't get asked, or that didn't get answered, sorry. And one of the things that we want to do at Mortarstone is actually continue the dialogue. And so we want to do some roundtable conversations that can include giving, budgets, year-end planning, and all those things. And so if you're interested in something, there's a QR code, sign up for that. And by the way, we will be sending out these slides and the video or a video recording probably tomorrow. So be watching for that, but sign up and let's continue the dialogue. And the other thing, I already mentioned it, Justin did a great lead in for it, but we are going to be talking in the August webinar, basically talking through the impact and the opportunities that the One Big Beautiful Bill has provided. And it's one of those things where if you haven't thought that much about it, you're probably like a whole lot of people. But the thing that I know is every day I get probably about 3 emails from the philanthropic world where they're talking about how to leverage what the One Big Beautiful Bill has done regarding giving. And if we as the church are not leaning in and understanding the same thing, we're probably missing out on some great opportunities to disciple and encourage people. And the way I look at it is discipling and encouraging people around generosity is actually helping accelerate the mission of the church. And so thank you guys for being here, and truly thank you to our panelists. And folks, sorry if we didn't get to your questions, but we'd love to tackle them in some of the roundtables. So join us in that. And I'll put that back up, so if you missed it, you can do it one more time. But thank you, and we will look forward to next month. Thanks.